Welcome back to Truck Talks, not where I'm talking about politics like some pissed off redneck in his truck complaining about Obama, but where I just talk about things that interest me because, I don't always have somebody to talk to, or maybe I just want to hear myself talk, right? So today's topic is conspiracies, and the main thing that I want to talk about is that I think conspiracy theorists, right, people who are right, get into trouble in blatantly believing every single conspiracy, right? And every single thing about a conspiracy, right? So I think that with a lot of conspiracies, there are things that, well, let's say at least the credible ones, right? We'll say that there are things that are probably definitely correct, but intermixed in all that bits of truth is some things that are wrong. And that's what detracts from the credibility of a lot of people who believe conspiracies without actually really thinking them through. So for example, if there's a conspiracy that I believe, which there are a lot, right? I've probably thought a lot about it, like everything about it that I can possibly think of, and I've weighed those things to determine whether or not I believe them. So let's give an example, right? So let's talk about the moon landing, right? There's a conspiracy that we never went to the moon, right? I think that two things can exist at the same time. I think you can believe that the video that we were shown of astronauts being on the moon and the phone call that the president received in the Oval Office, I think you can believe that that didn't happen. But I think you can also believe that we went to the moon at the same time. It's just that what we were shown wasn't us going to the moon, which is what I think. I think we probably did go to the moon at one point or another, but I don't think the production that we got out here in no man's land was us actually going to the moon. I think at that time it was all a ploy to, show other countries, hey, we got there first. That's what I think, right? But if I'm a conspiracy theorist and I haven't really thought about all the evidence that I'm seeing, and I can just say, we never went to the moon, we never been to the moon, you know what I mean? It's like, hey, you can believe that, but, there might be some truth in there and some not truth. And I think that's what the people who are responsible for the conspiracies do, is they plant some deception in there. Like, we know that, right? Through their agencies do that all the time. But if I can plant just enough deception somewhere to make people think, everybody's crazy, and never believe them, then I've successfully driven a population away from ever questioning things that are really important, right? So like aliens are probably another one, right? So like there's definitely secret government agencies working on craft that nobody knows anything about. But if you start planting a few people to talk about how they got abducted and were anal probed, which could have happened, it's going to start putting up walls with the general population and the people who aren't conspiracy theorists. And they'll start saying, nobody gets anal probed, you're just a freaking nut job who believes in aliens, right? But in all reality, these beings and entities exist. Everybody knows this. Everybody that actually thinks for once in their life, right? And we've got tons of credible accounts of people having worked on these craft within the government. Bob Lazar, for one. If so long as you believe him, I don't see any reason not to, right? But it's just another example of people taking conspiracies and not really thinking them through and being able to articulate their arguments. So here's another one. Let's talk chemtrails, right? So a lot of people use the term chemtrail synonymous with cloud seeding, right? So conspiracy theorists will attribute a trail coming from a plane as a chemtrail. Now, all of the meteorological people will say that those are just contrails, right? Okay, but as a conspiracy theorist, I'm thinking, okay, prove to me that that's a contrail and not somebody injecting chemicals in the air, right? But then the conspiracy theorists miss too, because they might not know about stratospheric aerosol injection, which is what I think these contrails are, right? I think they're freaking reflecting the sun back out of the atmosphere, right? I think that's what that is. It's no secret that they're working on stratospheric aerosol injection, right? Not at all. Not a secret at all. That verifiably happens. Cloud seeding also happens. I don't think that what we see coming from jets is the cloud seeding, but I do definitely question what is ever coming out of the back of jets and what chemicals are in there, which is why people use chemtrails synonymously with everything that they don't understand, right? But I also think that's very obviously the display of stratospheric aerosol injection, right? Because it's super obvious. If I walk out my back door at 4 a.m. and I see a bunch of freaking jets flying by all over, and over the next 4 to 5 hours, that dissipates, and now there's a haze over the entire sky, and the sun is blocked out. And the day before, I got a notification on my phone that says, expect cooling for the next 3 days, right? You can't tell me that's not what that is, because that's obviously what that is, right? And so the question is, why is it so difficult to prove these things? And a lot of people on the other side who don't believe any conspiracy ever and just lick the boot of the government, right? So the other problem with those people is that they'll say, well, the conspiracy would have to be too grand on too big of a scale, therefore it can't possibly be true. And like, have you ever never watched a movie, like a high stakes movie, where there's this grand mastermind bad guy with a lot of money, and everybody else that's just in the civilization in one of these movies has like no idea what's going on, but there's like a few group of people, there's like good people trying to stop them, right? The cops or whatever it is. And then there's like this team of bad guys doing bad shit. Pardon my language. And people think that stuff doesn't happen in real life, right? So the question is, if there is a global satanic cabal running the world, and as above, so below, they have hierarchies of we'll say, supernatural entities in charge that are given dominion over certain parts of the earth, which is true if you believe scripture, right? Then why on earth wouldn't I believe that they have the power to pull off a grand scheme, a grand manipulation of the masses, to poison the human race, to screw up the earth by reflecting the sun of the atmosphere, because they've convinced everybody that global warming is so bad and cow farts are a bad thing and we need to kill all the cows? Like, why wouldn't you believe that? If Satan is the ruler of the earth, which it says if you believe scripture, then why wouldn't I believe that he and his beings are smarter than I in everything except their submission to the God, the one true God, right? Why wouldn't I believe that? Why wouldn't I believe they could manipulate people strategically over the course of years and years and years and years, both people who knowingly work for him and who don't, and do something such as mass chemtrails, or cover up the moon, or cover up the JFK assassination? Like, this stuff isn't hard. It's not hard. If you start to question what people are willing to do for money and power, and what people are willing to do purely out of the evilness of their own hearts, then you start to be able to ask the question, okay, what would I do if I was an evil dictator that hated everybody besides myself? You know, these are important things to ask. These are things you want to know. I want to know why all these jets have freaking exhaust stuff coming out the back, and why everybody just gaslights us into saying, oh, it's just contrails, it's normal. It's just normal. That's why the sky changes after they fly over. It's source condensation. Can't stand it. Can't stand it.